Hello there, and welcome to the Impromptu Game Plan podcast. My name is Sarah Ferguson, and I'm joined today by my partner in crime, collaborator, and co-author, Catherine Reynolds. Catherine and I have authored the upcoming book, The Impromptu Game Plan, the purposeful but also opportunistic careers of people like me. This book explores the career and life stories of people who've made pivots in their lives, sometimes through choice, sometimes as a reaction to opportunity or challenge, or both, to create more meaningful careers that utilize their strengths and experiences and speak to their passions and values. And after listening to and reflecting on those stories, we drew out some common themes, mindsets, and behaviors to create a framework, our storytelling wheel of reflection. These podcasts are going to be a series of conversations with people at various stages of their career journeys, where we use our storytelling wheel of reflection to talk about where they're coming from and where they think they want to go. We know that millennials crave more purpose from their careers and lives. They don't want to do what their parents and grandparents did, be content to start on the bottom rung of a safe job for a stable company and work 9 to 5 in an office each day. And so for our first podcast in the series, I am very excited that we're going to interview my almost 21-year-old daughter, Anya. We've asked Anya to join us today because, as someone more than halfway through their degree, she has some idea of the field she's interested in, but hasn't really started to think seriously about the kinds of jobs she might apply for when she graduates. And on a personal note, as her mother, I'd like her to start thinking about this soon. And so this is a pretty self-serving podcast, if I'm honest. So Anya, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about what you're studying and where, and what you're interested in.
So I'm Anya. I am 20 years old. I am a double major at Roger Williams University studying aquarium science and aquaculture and media communications with a concentration in marine biology.
And Anya, where is Roger Williams University?
It's in Bristol, Rhode Island.
Great.
My interests are skiing and watching TV, and I am very interested in Marvel and Harry Potter and Star Wars films.
And fish.
That's about it. And fish. Yes, I'm very interested in fish and their aquariums and reefs. I'm very interested in reefs.
And what are you interested in reefs? What's some of the issues around reefs?
Well, coral reefs are they are dying because ocean acidification and they are turning white and they're just not alive anymore. And so I am really interested in working on making the ocean less acidic for the corals to thrive, and also to work on artificial corals to try and get those ecosystems back to where they should be, so that way habitats can thrive.
Fabulous.
And Anya, Catherine here, jumping into the conversation. I'm really, really curious to know, I mean, I think that is an absolutely amazing values, authentic driven line of interest in your, sort of looking down the lens towards your future and the difference that you want to make in the world. But why saving the coral reefs, or, participating in the artificial reefs? Why is that so important for you in our world, given all the changes that are occurring and all the challenges that we face?
Well, I was always interested in coral reefs because I think that they're beautiful, and I just think that in those habitats, like something like the Great Barrier Reef, which is massive, the biggest coral reef, and it's just dying. And with the thing about the coral reef dying is it's not just about the coral, which is a living organism. It also all of the things that rely on the corals to survive. So there's so many, it's not just fish, there's like turtles and like different organisms and microorganisms, and then they rely on not just the coral but the surrounding habitat to survive. And so with those gone, it leads for a lot less protection for certain creatures, and I'm very interested in saving like the fish. I study mainly aquarium fish.
So let me ask you a question here. Let me cut in and ask you a question. Because Catherine asked me this, and I was kind of appalled that as your mother, I didn't actually know the answer. Well, I think I know the answer. Where this interest in fish came from?
So, first of all, as a child, my favorite Disney princess movie was The Little Mermaid.
Was it?
I have a stuffed animal unicorn named Ariel that I've carried around with me since I was 3 years old.
That's why she's called Ariel? Okay.
And you don't know this, Sarah?
Apparently, I'm broadcasting to the world what a terrible mother I am.
the Little Mermaid's name is Ariel.
Okay.
So,
All right.
know, she was my favorite because I loved the ocean and I loved the fish.
Yeah.
And then when I was in 4th grade, my class took a trip to the New England Aquarium. And it was the coolest experience of my whole life. Their giant ocean tank, which I know a lot more about now because my professor for my class works closely with the New England Aquarium, but their giant ocean tank, which is this giant tube tank that stretches from the floor to the ceiling past multiple levels that you can walk around. And it just, the entire trip was like the coolest thing to me. And then when I went back to Boston with my mom, maybe a year or two later, I went to the aquarium with her friends. And it was still the coolest thing. And I got to touch a bunch of stingrays. So the New England Aquarium. And then when I was a junior in high school, my school offered a trip to Bermuda to go mainly to the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences. And that's where I kind of decided that's what I really wanted to do. But the interest started all the way back then.
Okay. So Catherine,
you were slightly right.
Okay. So when we think about the storytelling wheel and sort of the 4 quadrants of experience, mindset, strengths and passions, I think we know we've kind of got Anya's passions locked up.
Yeah, I think that's right, Sarah. We're getting to the heart of Anya's passions. But one of the things I'm curious about as we investigate the sort of the beginnings of the thoughts about the life well lived, the difference that sort of our younger career makers wanted to make, and the fact that sort of they potentially don't want jobs, they want a life where they're making a difference. I'm curious, Anya, just to get us started off, and then I'd like to dig, as Sarah suggests, into the wheel of reflection and what you've noticed there. But I'm curious to understand at sort of at high school, and now that you're at university, who are the sort of mentors? Sort of obviously you've got your teachers now. You're at university, your professors, but particularly when you were at high school, who did you feel able to have these conversations with, and what were those conversations like?
Well, the person that I mainly spoke to about everything was my advisor, Miss Price. She was very helpful, but the real main person that helped me with my entire life, her name was Emily Snyder, and I wouldn't have graduated without her. She wasn't a teacher, she just worked at the school, and I would meet with her all of the time. And I saw her, she came to my job recently because she didn't know where I work. I work at Staples Office Supplies. It's not very interesting, but she came in and she saw me and she was just like the happiest with me doing like how I was doing in life. And just, I could still talk to her, and I ended up talking to her about the struggles that I have now. She's just like, through like all of high school, she was very helpful. And then now that I'm in college, the person that like helps me and makes sure that I'm on track is the dean of my department, Dean Greenstein. He's very helpful. He makes sure that I stay in the school and meets with me whenever I have problems, because his major that he went through in college is very weird compared to what you would think. He was a film studies major, but also marine biology and geology. So like he had like a whole mix of things. And when I was changing my major, because I was originally a marine biology major exclusively, and then I changed it, he was the one who was like, public relations and media communications goes perfectly because I was film studies and it's okay to do something a little different. And
I said that.
He was the one who agreed, because you said that it was okay, and then
and you thought it was stupid till he said it.
Well, because I didn't make any sense.
Your mom, and he's the dean, so go figure.
I mean, out.
Well, the fact that I didn't think that a science and a communications degree really made much sense together until he pulled from his own experiences and was like, I have that exact thing.
Okay.
So
I'm glad he validated my idea.
Yes.
It seems to me that going forward, we're going to see more of these combined degrees, because being able to communicate well about things that matter is going to be vital to actually making the world a better place and actually getting the just rewards for the things that you care about and where you're investing your efforts. So Anya, thank you for taking the time to actually look at our materials thus far. This has been, sort of a passion project for us, as I'm sure you've heard from your mum. But Yes, but what I say to everybody is when they first come to the wheel of reflection is that this is very different to any other model for thinking about one's working life or one's career. This is not about getting advancement. This is about getting joy, and as such, it's not a linear process. It is actually looking at everything that's in the wheel and asking yourself, sort of, where does my attention land? So where is what I would call the gravitational pull? So, sort of, you don't have to start with experiences, although it sounds like you've got some amazing experiences, all of your teamwork in the skiing, your job in Staples, leaving home and going to university. I mean, this is a vast array of experiences that you can draw on. But, experience might not be where your attention first lies. It might be that it's passions or strengths or mindset. So I'd really just like to hear from you as a starting point. When you looked at this, when you read some of the detail, where did your attention first land and why?
I think on passions because I care. I don't really have I don't think of myself as having like a lot of like set strengths, but I think of myself as having a lot of passions because I like a lot of things. I don't A lot of those things don't actually transfer over into anything that I could potentially use as a job um in my life because most of those are fandom based uh passions, but I also really enjoy like some other things like skiing and hanging out with people, which I know aren't like the best passions, but like they're the ones that I have. But it's like the one that I think of the most when I look at the wheel is the passions area. It's the one that jumped out at me because I have a lot of passions. So,
And sort of, Anya, I'd be really curious to know a little bit more about, before I actually overlay my own interpretation of what I've just heard, which is not that you only have passions, but sort of thinking about why you're drawn to the passions rather than strengths and experiences and mindsets. Tell me a little bit more about that.
well, I don't know. I am very I don't feel like I have a lot of strengths just because I struggled doing a lot of things, especially in school. Um, like my only real strength is that I am good at hands-on things. But like anything else where I'm being taught things or like people are trying to give me information or like anything like that, I just can't even do that. And like most of my experiences are very I think I can think of some experiences, but like there's not a lot of experiences that I can like fully think of that like have shaped where I'm going besides like how I got to my major. But like I even the way I ended up at my school isn't like an experience that I'm like meant to do. And then mindset, I just don't have a great mindset. So I can't even say that that one is one that I have. So I just think that passions, because passions, like my whole life revolves around like my passions. Like my apartment is decorated with my passions, and then there's tons of things like that. So like all of my passions like surround me all of the time, so I'm very comfortable with them and talking about them. But everything else, I'm just less think about.
First of all, I want to jump in and say, as your mother, I know I've said this to you before, I think you have a lot of strengths that you don't give yourself credit for. And Catherine and I have talked about this a lot, which is just because the education system is set up for a very narrow band of people and their strengths doesn't mean that you don't have strengths. It just means that the education system, the way we have it now, doesn't necessarily play to those strengths. So you need to stop saying you don't have strengths. I think you have many, many strengths as a person. I mean, what do you think your strengths are? When you think about your job, where they love you. No, why do they love you at Staples?
Because I do my job the way I'm supposed to and I do it correctly.
But Anya, I've got a I was going to say I've got a little bit of a challenge here for you, but I think this is quite a big challenge. And that is that, sort of, I'm very used to having conversations like this with people right across the career spectrum. And, sort of, if there is only one strength that you can acknowledge from today, and probably from what I'm about to say, many more will drift into your consciousness over time, is that you have an enormous strength, a conviction of will to follow your passions.
I think that my biggest strength is that I am very good at doing what I'm supposed to be doing and doing it well. I'm very good at following what the things that I'm supposed to do, like at my job.
But at your job, yes, and that is a great strength for your job. But you've just told me that you didn't follow the routine path, if you like, towards which school you would go to and what you would study at that school, and if that might change during the course of your study.
Oh, it already changed. It already changed.
It already changed. But that takes conviction. That takes courage to be able to make those changes. And so the mindset then, so if you've got that as a passion, this is what I want to do, this is the change I want to see in the world, to borrow from, sort of people wiser and far more famous than myself. But, to follow that passion, I need to actually be able to articulate my strengths, as well as notice things that aren't my strengths, because if they're not my strengths, I need to do one of two things. Do I need that strength to do what I need to do? Maybe, maybe not, make that decision. Or if I have a strength that, sort of I'm not seeing, how can I actually see that strength better and use it more? So, being able to see your strengths like that, but also to recognize the mindset, which is the mindset you're displaying right now is, my mindset says I don't have any strengths, but you're telling us that you do. So why can't, sort of, what will it take for you to tell yourself that you have strengths?
So I don't really know. I think that once I graduate and I actually leave college, I'll be able to see more what my strengths are. But while I'm here, everything is just education surrounded. And I know that my big weakness is learning through a classroom and taking things like tests and notes and listening to long lectures.
I'm going to jump in with another strength of yours, because you just said something, and I think you don't, again, give yourself enough credit, which is education has been hard for you, and it's going to take longer for you in college than the average person. A lot of people would give up. And, I know you felt despondent and disheartened at times, but you haven't given up. You're continuing to keep going. You've got a plan.
I did ask both you and Daddy if I was allowed to drop out, and you did say no. So,
but you're also, that is true. But honestly, do you think that would have been the right thing? I mean, that you.
No.
Right. So
yes, I obviously need to graduate, because
perseverance in the face of adversity is a strength.
So if I could just step in there in the mummy and daughter chit chat there, which is fascinating.
Please do.
Because you see, what I hear in that is that, sort of, it's the whole concept of resilience. Because, when we're faced with adversity, the often the easiest and most obvious course of action, and sometimes the most courageous course of action, is to step away from the adversity. Sometimes it requires somebody else to hold up a mirror and say, don't take that course yet, because your ability to bounce back, your innate, sort of commitment to what you're doing is strong enough to get you through. And sometimes it takes somebody else to actually say that to us. And sometimes when it's mom and dad, it sounds like they're telling you not to drop out. But, sort of, if it was, the dean, for example, then it would sound like, sort of courageous, wise counsel. And what we tend to do, and what we tend to do over the course of our career is gather what I call our personal board of directors. So we've got mom and dad saying this, we've got the dean saying this, we've got, so the roommates saying this, and it's the ability, the increasing strength and, sort of critical ability, which is, one of the things that you'll be strengthening whilst you're at university, to actually take all of those views and make your own decision. Because mom and dad didn't force you to stay, did they? They just said it wouldn't be a good idea to go.
They just said that you really shouldn't drop out of school. I would probably regret that.
And you decided to stay.
For now. Yes, I have.
Yeah. You did the right thing, but you made the choice. And I think that's one of the critical things, when you're looking at the wheel of reflection. Where did I make choices? Where can I make choices? And where in the future should I make choices? And that will change over time. So just actually, having something like this in your back pocket that, sort of, there's, really, really senior leaders in business around the world that I do a similar sort of conversation with, and they actually take themselves off somewhere really interesting, like, sort of Bermuda or Papua New Guinea or wherever they can afford to, admittedly. But once a year, they take themselves on what they call a retreat, and they take the equivalent of their, sort of, wheel of reflection, and they sit down and they just think about, everything that's happened in the year and everything that they want to happen in the next year, and how they can learn from what's happened in the year that's gone past and what they can actually do to make the year that's coming up the best it can possibly be. So in thinking about that, the capacity to learn from what's gone by in order to be able to influence what you want to do or the choices you want to make in the future. But, thinking about how you learn and what you've learned over the last year and what you might carry forward into your working life going forward, as opposed to a specific job or role. How would you typify or describe that?
So I learn best in hands-on situations like labs, which I luckily have a lot of.
Yeah.
I have a lab at least every semester, and with my particular labs, they're mainly with my main professor, who's also my advisor. His name is Andy, and every single lab I have with him, I tend to remember all of the information, no matter what. In one of my labs, I raised and bred urchins from, like, I bred them and raised them, and I everything.
Wow.
And so I can tell you the entire thing of how to raise an urchin and breed an urchin. So I learn mainly from experience, I think. And then I'm able to transfer that experience over and then expand upon it, because now that I know how to breed urchins, that's very similar to how you breed other things or different kinds of urchins even. So it's just I think that the things that I learned through hands-on are able to really transfer over. And then when I move on to other classes or things like that, if I've had a hands-on experience, it makes it easier for me to just understand the information that I'm being told.
Well, Anya, that is really powerful, because what you've just done, I don't know if you noticed, but you're working in the area of your passion. You're growing an urchin from, whatever they grow from. What you've described is your passion, leading you to build and execute a very successful experience, which you've then described as being a transferable experience. So the mindset that you're displaying there is that I can have this experience and I can do something else with it that will actually be useful to me now and in the future. And the strength that you've described is adaptability, transferability, and the ability to learn, knowing what your preferred learning style is. So you've just whipped around the whole wheel without even blinking an eye, which is very, very, very encouraging. But, I think, sort of what we see at the heart of the conversation we're having here is that, sort of you have a very profound set of values, and sort of using that to continue to guide you through whatever role and endeavor that you commit to is very, very powerful. But I'm curious, just to actually press a little bit harder. I'm not a great advocate of the great job. I'm a great advocate of the great role, the great life well lived. Sometimes it means combining roles. Sometimes it means changing roles repeatedly. And so I'm just wondering what, sort of, and I know it's very early in sort of the sequence of events, because you're only halfway through your undergraduate degree, but how do you see this playing out? What does a job, what does a role, what does, sort of a purposeful endeavor post-graduation look like for you?
Okay, so from the fact that my aquarium science and aquaculture degree, I am really interested in, since I changed to that degree, is working in an aquarium, which my mom isn't a biggest fan of me just working in an aquarium, but I would love to work in maybe an aquarium, a rescue aquarium eventually, like rescuing and breeding endangered species, because there's breeding programs that are meant just to enhance the population of endangered species, and I would love to do that. And also rehabilitation of, because I don't think that for me, aquariums I have a very weird relationship with, because yes, I'm studying them and I am very interested in them, but I don't always agree with like why animals are kept. And I am much more comfortable would be working in a rescue. Although I know that aquariums, the only reason you can have a display is for conservation education purposes from a class that I took last semester. It's still, I prefer to know that I'm helping them in a way that's like actually helping. So I think that right out of college, I would try and get just any aquarium job just as an aquarist, just working at like the lowest like aquarium, just to get comfortable working in an aquarium. And then I would want to move into like more working with the animals and things. My mother is moving to Grenada and has met someone who is working on creating an artificial coral reef, and when I graduate I would be interested in working on that.
And that's absolutely fascinating, Anya, for all sorts of reasons. And one of the questions that I have going off in my mind is, sort of how typically to date have people entered a field like this, and how might they enter a field like this going forward?
Well, for me personally, getting started in this kind of field is really through experience and through internships. So at my school, we have a marine wet lab, which is really cool. That's where I bred the urchins, right? Which there's a bunch living down there right now. I'm currently rebuilding a water tower system that's down there. And so my advisor, Andy, he has the biggest amount of connections out of anybody, and he knows everybody in every single aquarium all around the world. But then he also gets internships, and so I think that it really comes through experience and just through working with other people in the field, because it's kind of opportunistic. I'm lucky I have Andy who gives me all of these opportunities, not just in classes but like in our labs and outside, to do all of these things, like rebuilding an entire system that produces clean water for the whole lab. Like, that's really cool, and I would never have done that. But now I can say I have that experience, which gives me experience outside of class and helps me in the future with internships, and then I can get internships and move on. Because also, any aquarium that is AZ accredited, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and they are given grants and funding, and they fund different projects and different NGOs and nonprofits and little research things and conservation, and then those things need people, and so opportunities pop up just out of those, and you can be put in one and then it'll bounce you around all over. And there's aquariums all over the world. Some of the best aquariums aren't here. Like, there's ones in Japan that are amazingly massive. They have the biggest tank, like millions of gallons of water. So.
And do you know, Anya, as you describe all of that, and sort of as you so, despite yourself being so articulate and describing, your passions, how they link to experiences, strengths, and your mindset. And I think the mindset is the thing where, sort of if that continues to open up as your confidence grows, as you complete your further stages of study, is that, as you're able to describe to these, sort of funding agencies, to the not-for-profits, to the NGOs, to the various stakeholders and sponsors, you're able to articulate this fullest sense of what you bring to a project, whereas every last intern application is going to actually be going, I'm passionate about, the fish, I'm passionate about, marine ecology, I'm passionate about this, that, or the other. So increasingly becoming articulate to further explain the, sort of where you sit in relation to passions, experiences, strengths, and mindset. I think, you're doing a great job already, despite yourself, despite what you think about what you're doing. But that can only serve you well in building that portfolio that will actually open the doors to the things that you really, really want to do in your contributing life going forward.
Just, because this is on the record, I did not say don't work in an aquarium. I said you can't spend your career cleaning fish tanks.
I know. I meant that I know that you would prefer that I go into a career where I can probably make money and support myself. And
let's stop there. Where you can support yourself. Yes, your father and I would like you to eventually be able to support yourself. I think every parent would agree with that. No, I was just going to say, I think we're probably sort of coming up on the end of this. So, what would be a good wrap up, Catherine? How do you want to wrap up the last 5 minutes or so?
Well, do you know, I think that the best wrap up would be, sort of having, sort of coursed all over the wheel of reflection, Anya, sort of actually hearing from you. I mean, you've heard from me what, sort of how impressed I am that, you've covered the wheel, you are covering the wheel, and I hope that the wheel will be useful going forward. But that's just from my sense of things, sort of how does it leave you feeling? What are you thinking now?
I mean, I've always kind of thought I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going at all, but I just feel a little less stressed about it. And maybe like I could actually, like I somewhat seem to know what I'm talking about in my own head, but I didn't think I did before.
Well, you certainly sound like you know what you're talking about to me, Anya. And if I could just, sort of do a minor, what we call in mindset work as a reframe. So rather than saying that you're further behind than other people in your class, you're at a different place. And that's your place. And it's the place that you need to be to complete what you need to do to get where you want to be.
That's true.
So please don't be so hard on yourself, and don't let anybody ever put those, sort of judgmental words into your head. It's your place, it's where you're at, and it's where you need to be right now.
Anya, let me just end by first of all thanking you for doing this with us and saying I am extraordinarily proud of you, as is your father. I think we both believe you have many strengths and you have a wonderful future ahead of you. And if I wanted anything for you, it was that you believed in yourself a little bit more. So if this has helped towards that, I'm very happy.
It has.